Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am joined for the first time, and I already feel not the last time, by Mr. Tom Luongo, who many of you know from many other channels. I'm very happy that Tom decided to find time for this conversation. And he's a financial, economic, and geopolitical analyst. And also, besides being an author, he is a dairy goat farmer. And I just side note here, I love goat cheese and goat products. So thank you for doing
So
what you're doing.
thank you. Good morning, Anya. It's good to meet you. Sadly, I have to update my bio because we did sell the goats last year after fighting it for a long time.
Oh,
But I do enjoy. I did really enjoy owning them for quite a long time. It was great. I loved making goat cheese and everything else that went along with it. It was a lot of fun. But it's just my life has just kind of changed, and it was time to finally let that go. So hopefully one day in the future, I'll just be a resource for other people who do want to raise them, and we'll go from there. And if things melt down and the world collapses, well, I know how to raise goats and I know how to feed myself. So we'll go that route. So
yes. We need that kind of knowledge very soon, I think, all of us. So let me start with the most important topic, which is mainly why I really wanted to connect with you today, not the
Mhm.
other day that we had the option. So as most of my viewers know, tomorrow, October 22nd, for 3 days in city of Kazan,
Mhm.
in Tatarstan, we will have the 16 BRICS meetings. 32 countries have confirmed their participation, with over 20 of those countries sending their leaders. And I want to read one more thing here. This is from TASS. Delegates will discuss the key issues of the global economy and politics, such as interaction in security sphere, a reform of the international financial system, the development of interbank cooperation, and the expansion of mutual payments in national currencies. So I have two questions here for you, Tom.
Sure.
First one is, what do you expect from this meeting? This is, I know it's a very general question, but I would say like
Sure.
the biggest breakthrough for everyone in the world after this. And as we are seeing the end of the US dollar, what does this really mean, the end of the US dollar for United States
Mhm.
and Europe? Because BRICS is already doing its own thing.
So what I'll say is the following. I don't see the end of the dollar anytime soon. Let's just start there. What I see is a world breaking up into regional economic blocks, and BRICS is one aspect and one major aspect of that process occurring. If you look, I'm going to talk about it from an American perspective first, and to give you an understanding of where I'm going, and then we'll talk about why they're. Once you understand that, then you'll understand why I don't even think that this is an adversarial situation. I mean, it is at a certain level, and it is at other levels, but let's just start there. If you go back over the last couple of years, you'll realize that FOMC chair Jerome Powell has informed everybody on Capitol Hill that having the global reserve currency is a burden the U.S. can no longer bear. He's made it abundantly clear in congressional testimony that there's room in the world for more than one reserve currency. Now, presumably, he's saying that the dollar can still be one of those, and there may be some other reserve currency out there. One could argue that could be gold or a basket of currencies like the BRICS are are proposing, or the marriage of the two. What it really means is that the U.S. has to, if it wants to survive in its current form, is going to have to take the humility pill and cut back on the empire and cut back on all the infrastructure um, that undergirds the current dollar-based system, which I don't think is being fought by certain factions on both Wall Street and Capitol Hill, or at least not Capitol Hill per se, but certainly Wall Street. Capitol Hill, on the other hand, is still all in on this whole global governance model. And we see it in people like Nancy Pelosi. We see it in Chuck Schumer. We see it in the Biden administration in general at every agency level, from the Samantha Powers at USAID to Pete Buttigieg at Transport to Janet Yellen at Treasury to Anthony Blinken at State. We also see it coming from the European Union. And the European Union desperately believes that, and to a great extent, also the City of London. And they firmly believe that they have the right and or duty to push for the control of global resources and still control their pricing. That's what this is all about. Sadly, that's what the war in Ukraine is all about. It's to a lesser extent what the conflict in between Israel and the rest of the Arab world is all about, or Israel and Iran is all about. If you'll notice that there are two major conflicts right now, and two of the major players in BRICS, and I consider the I in BRICS to be Iran, not India, and have so since, 2017. That when you look at it that way, and then of course the other one that they're attacking is of course China, and that triangle, what I call the RIC triangle within BRICS, Russia, Iran, China, is what all you're seeing from policy is them trying to bust one leg of that triangle, and if they can bust one leg of that triangle, they can get the rest of it. They can get the stool to fall over, right? Because you can't create a stable object on two legs. You need three legs to form a tripod. So that's the thinking in DC. It's very clear that, and it's the same. It's the thinking, and has been the thinking in City of London going back 300 years, and it's the same thinking that's going on in Brussels, and to a lesser extent, obviously, places like Berlin and France and Paris supporting Brussels. There's a problem with that, which is that the BRICS understand exactly what's going on here, and they have leadership in all three of those places, Russia, Iran, and China, that understand exactly what the game is and what the plan is. What we have is the United States, as the biggest player at the table, is the fulcrum on which this fight portends, right? And I see, and Americans as a understanding, it's hard for people outside of the West to understand. And it's certainly hard for people outside of the United States to understand. Heck, for most Americans, they don't understand it, which is that we still have a psychologically inferior position to that of our European forebears, meaning the colonial powers that Europeans ran away from to form the colonies are still, we still have this inferiority complex in many ways when it comes to, we still look to the British and or the French and everybody else as some form of superior civilization, and we should be aligned with them against, well, as they would put it in the EU, the jungle of the rest of the world. That's the way Joseph Borrell, the head diplomat of the European Union, described the European Union as a garden and the rest of the world as a jungle. And that's saying the quiet part out loud, right? So,
but Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but sure. I think we agree that especially since the conflict in Ukraine, well, it started much earlier than 2022, we know, but I will say the special military operation beginning, that Europe is doomed.
I agree. I'm just setting up I just want to make sure that we're like setting the background properly. Like when I lay the world out in economic blocks as a big game board, like there's like 4 players at the game board. And I hate to lump the entirety of what's known as the global South into one player, because it really isn't. You've got Asia, you've got South America, and you've got the US, Europe, and the UK, and they're all really different factions. When you look at who has what in terms of actual resources that you can use to collateralize an economy, Europe doesn't have any. And so they're the sick man at the table. The British are still trading on the vestiges of their financial and maritime power from the previous centuries. They still have a lot of relationships with all of these countries that used to be their colonies around the world, and they have very deep relationships with members of the oligarchies in every one of those countries. And I'm talking not just about the United States, but India and Hong Kong and other places all the way around the world. So you can't discount British influence at that level. And you can see it every time somebody tries to, every time India tries to get too close to the BRICS, the British are in there doing something. They're sending their foreign secretary over there. They're starting a local conflict in an outlying area or a border skirmish between India and China or something along those lines. And it's always MI6. It's always them. And then at some level, they always blame the CIA. Because it's convenient to blame the CIA because the Americans are so stupid in having allowed ourselves to be the front man for this crazy nonsense that every time you invoke the British, they back off and go, no, we're not doing it. It's the CIA, because the CIA is running drugs or they're running the weapons, but it's the British who set everything up, right?
So the crown, you're saying the crown is pulling the strings?
It's I wouldn't say it's like even within the British system at this point, there's a split because they have, like we have in the United States, a globalist faction that's aligned with Brussels that wants to institute global government, and then they're old sovereigntists who are not good people, right? So the British crown and the old European elite and the old British aristocracy that fomented, the Boer War and all the other wars of the 19th and 18th, 19th, 20th centuries. And then you have the same problem in the United States because you have all those people aligned with them. Right. And so that's how you get the Lindsey Grahams and the Mitt Romneys and, the people on the left side. It's hard to find really good examples of this on the left-hand side of the equation anymore, because most of them have been replaced in the Democratic Party by people loyal to Obama. And Obama, of course, maps to Brussels and Europe. Right. And so the best way to look at this is to look at the divide that happens within Israel. Like if you watched Brexit and the fight over Brexit, and you watched what was happening concurrently, you saw the same kind of political turmoil in Israel as Netanyahu versus his detractors. It was like Netanyahu on one side representing the old British remnant, and then Naftali Bennett and others, his opposition, representing Brussels' interests. All of this is about who gets cheap Iranian oil, right? And Europe knows that they need to get cheap Iranian oil, and they would rather get cheap Iranian oil than get cheap Russian oil at this point, because they know that if Russia rises too far, Russia now becomes a power that they can't control. So clearly the goal in Brussels is to help cleave off Iran, but do so in such a way that also they destroy what's left of the British remnant, i.e. Israel, i.e. the city of London and everything else. Now all needs to be subsumed. That's why Keir Starmer was installed as British prime minister. It's why they fought Brexit so hard. It's why all of these things have occurred. They've been laying those plans for years. And the problem now is that the United States is going, you know what? This is bad for us. And there's a certain faction within the U.S. nominally headed by Donald Trump, but it's deeper than that. That is saying no to this. And it comes down to, and then the BRICS are just saying, look, if you're kicking us out of our system, as Putin said recently, I can't remember if it was at Spieth or Valdai or wherever he said it recently. It might have just been in one of his, regular policy statements. He said, look, we didn't leave the dollar system. We were kicked out. Russia didn't want to leave. Russia just wanted, to trade and be friends with everybody and sell everybody gas and oil and tungsten and aluminum and everything else. And let's just do the thing. And let's just end all of these age-old conflicts that have all been manufactured in many ways. And the terms of those, the debate around those conflicts have all been set by the British. It's downstream of age-old British foreign policy going back 200 years. It's nothing new because it's in service of this idea of global governance and global governance through a global monetary system that they sit at the top of and still continue to allow themselves to arrogate and curate and grab all the resources necessary to run that system at less than a penny on the dollar or less than a penny on the pound or however you want to put it. And that's the way they've done it. And give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Think about when Giorgia Meloni, the head of the prime minister of Italy, exposed to the world France's extractive monetary system that they have for the 14 countries that are still their colonies, the CFA franc, and why they fought so hard to hold on to Niger and Boko Haram and all of those countries in the Sahel region of Africa, because the French were still extracting at literally 0.1 pennies on the euro, uranium, gold, diamonds, cobalt, lithium, everything from these countries. And all these countries said was, okay, we're done with that. Can we please have 5%? And the French are like, no. America, get in there and put down these upstarts, you know. And I'm not going to use a racist term here, but you know what they're thinking. Like these are people that are beneath us French and us English and us Germans and Portuguese and everybody else. They're beneath us, and they need to be kept as effectively our slaves. And these people are like, no. And that's why that's why you saw things like Russia go in there with the Wagner Group, and go in and help stabilize the situations. Why you see the Chinese deploying money all over Africa in order to help that region of Africa grow up, and then cut them in as partners. Now, I don't know if the Russians and the Chinese are going to offer them a better deal than the British and the French did, but I think they're not going to have an option to do so because they're so much farther away. I mean, just geographically, and neither of these countries, no offense to the Russians and the Chinese in the audience, but you're not as strong as those people were when they set those relationships up. The Europeans were the dominant economic powers of the 18th and 19th centuries. Since 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, they set up those relationships when they were orders of magnitude more powerful than the people that they were colonizing. Today, that gradient is not nearly as high, and so therefore, you're going to see this year get a much better deal, for example, out of the Russians than would have ever gotten out of the French.
But this is very interesting take on that you have on this. I want to ask you a question. It's actually, it's a very personal question because I have my opinion about Russia. I've been there many times, and I have certain emotions about the country. I'm from Poland myself, so it's a Slavic blood. There is a sense of bond and understanding that is different than many other cultures might not find. But I still have this question deep somewhere back in my mind. What is that? So we know there is the 2030 agenda. We know there is this, let's say, the Western collective, the group, Klaus Schwab, that is known as, he's irrelevant, but let's say that he represents this, right? Like it's a sticker face.
The powers that he represents, right? The powers that he represents. Yes.
Correct. So we have this. We already know what is this about. And ultimately, the main thing is one government and full control of everyone and taxation and executing this right away, which means the CBDC, which means we fully control what you're doing with your money, if you deserve it or not, which means no cash, because if you have cash, you still have some power to maneuver. But here is my question, because
Sure.
And I'm really trying to understand this, Tom, because I trust Russia, okay? But I still have this like 5% or whatever the percentage. So why they are also going digital? Because they are going to implement their own digital currency, ruble, and then they will have this unit or whatever is the name. I don't know if it is digital. They're going to operate. What I'm trying to say, BRICS is also going to be digital. Yes. So are we being all fooled? Because now we question everything, right? We have to question.
Of course.
What's really going on? Can we trust this or not?
I don't know. And I will say the following. In order to, let me put it this way. I've been saying for a long time, I'm going to reframe the question by talking about it in terms of gold. Okay. Let's think of it this way. I've said many times that the first country of any significance to remonetize gold by making it a reserve asset that is in some way convertible to the national currency. right? And the unit represents that idea. The first country to do that is going to force everybody else to do so, right? So, because once you have that as once you can, if you can manage that, then you're going to force up in other currencies the price of gold such that we're going to balance the scales versus and find out what the true price discovery is of all the commodities and the supply chains that run them are in the world, as opposed to the way they are priced today relative to a $2,700 an ounce gold, when I think that that number is closer to $27,000 in gold. And I'm not making a prediction that gold is going
I
to
have a
27.
question. I have a question about gold specifically, so I will ask you later.
Okay, but let's just talk about it. Yeah, that's fine. But let's just talk about it in these terms. So once you have that as a fear, because it's a possibility, someone can make that move on the game board. They could go, "Yep, gold's now remonetized." That's going to eventually force everybody else to remonetize, and you can see across the West, slowly but surely, gold is being remonetized by deprecating all of the infrastructure, the financialization infrastructure around gold, such that that's still there so that people can speculate on gold, but the physical gold doesn't transfer borders. So whatever the United States produces is going to stay in the United States, just like it does in China, just like it does in Russia, just like it does in Iran and other places. The rest of the central banks in the middle are all gearing up for this to happen. So everybody's getting ready to monetize gold. Well, guess what? Currencies in a global economic sense are already digital. More than 95% of all the dollars that run around the world are not cash. They're digital, right? We already have a digital dollar. We already have a digital euro. What we don't have is a programmable digital dollar that circulates to the exclusion of all other forms of dollars, right?
But
So,
we still have access to
so
cash.
now let's talk about what Russia and what they are doing. What I'm getting at here is, don't fear the word digital as a concept, okay? Because there are a lot of different forms of digital currencies. Bitcoin's a digital currency, and it's programmable, but it's also ideologically neutral, right? And maybe even this is another. I'll throw a bone to the Bitcoin coiners in the audience and say, maybe everybody forcing themselves to go digital and their payment layers underneath. And it's really the important part is that the wholesale demand for money at the repo markets, at the payment level and all that, that's what needs to be digitized, because that's old system is hideously inefficient is the word I'm looking for. It's hideously bad. We still have, for example, T+3 settlement on stock trades in the United States, which doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that goes along with that, and it's all because of the vestigial in plumbing and infrastructure. SWIFT is part of this. The IMF banking rules and they're all part of that. So, in order for us to actually have there's still going to be a global economy. The question is there going to be a global economy with any vestige of national sovereignty? When you listen to the Klaus Schwab and companies talk, they're talking in terms of no national sovereignty, okay, and a global programmable currency, and the end of commercial banking, and the pricing of risk by the capital markets. Now, we already have capital markets that are bad at pricing risk because the central banks and the governments and the oligarchs and all these evil people are purposefully destroying our ability to properly price risk. So now the question is, are we moving towards the proper pricing of risk or further away from it? Well, I think we've reached maximum malinformation within the economy. And so I think that we're hitting the top of that cycle, and we're pushing back towards a monetary system, a desire for a monetary system that is fairer now and better at assessing risk, but keeping liquidity necessary for a global economy high enough that we can still do business across borders, across the world, and all the rest of it. What BRICS is doing is saying, look, we're going to have a form of digital currency in order to bring all the countries together. Gold, if you look at the BRICS Pay app, by the way, my friend Vince Lanchi did this. You'll go through and what do you want to pay in? Do you want to pay in Russian rubles? Do you want to pay in UAE dirham? Do you want to pay in Iranian reals, or do you want to pay in gold? Gold is one of the guys on the list. And then the payment layer underneath, which will actually do all the currency conversions, that's the bigger question. And if that stays ideologically neutral, if that doesn't come with the baggage of a social credit score, now we already know that China has that. Now the question is, are the Russians going to move towards that? I don't think under Putin, I just don't see that. Okay. What I see is, the attempt at building a system. Now, China may want that for their own people with the internal onshore Chinese yuan. They've tried this. The uptake rate has been very low. They tried a programmable central bank digital currency in Nigeria. It failed. I think a lot of what we have to do here is understand that pulling something like this off is a Herculean task, probably nigh impossible. And because people will just sit back and go, you know what? I'll trade cowrie shells or salt or some other damn thing first. And I'm just going to say no to this. And I'm just going to be ungovernable and just say no. And that inertia and the amount of drag or monkey wrenching or whatever metaphor you want to use on their ability to implement this is high enough that it's going to be stillborn before it even starts. So, yeah. And I believe that, no, just one last point on this, because I know this has been a question that's been in front of me by a lot of by people I think are actually anti-Russian fifth columnists posing as pro-Russian sources. Okay. I don't think that we're moving towards that. I don't think that the physical ruble is going to go away at all. It's not under Putin, and certainly not under the people that he has been putting in power for him to, when he decides to exit the scene, that the way Russia is being governed by now and the people that are underneath Putin, I think he's been trying to build out an infrastructure at a political level that will immunize Russia from that ever happening. I don't know if I'm going to be right about that or not, but that's what I see. So.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. When I think about it, I always think about the elderly people, the elder generation, because those people, that's why they want to get rid of them. I mean, that's why the population, because it's not convenient and you cannot really suck much out of them, to be honest. Yes. So here is my vision. Then it seems to me like for quite some time we're gonna have two different, I would say a little bit esoteric way now, two different Earths on one planet Earth, because there will be one reality that is going to be that one day envisioned for the collective West, and then we're gonna have the other one emerging, which is on a very different frequency and level of thinking that is more human-like, focus more on humanity, and that is the BRICS solution. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about gold, because sure. I am, I'm not really, I don't understand crypto. Maybe that's where it comes from. However, I know there is a potential, and I don't think I ever learn much about it, so I'm a bit of skeptical as far as how safe it is if the internet goes down, etc. I'm not saying that this is bad completely, but it's right. Just my approach. But gold, I believe in precious metals, and as we know, in January 1939 there was the Gold Reserve Act, and I think it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I think
he was it was FDR. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes, and there was the value of gold was revalued from $20.67 to $35 per ounce. Now, FYI to everyone who cares, like I do, today we have, I think, the highest ever for 1 ounce of gold, which doesn't mean the gold is more worth. Is that paper money is worth less. This is $2,700, and silver went to 34, I think, today. Yep. So Tom, question here. With this, how much the US debt is now, $37 trillion. When this time will come, when they will announce the new value of gold? Because I know they are lying, okay? Like they are literally lying. So are they going to revalue this? They announce a new price for gold. Is this going to be in stages? And what it will do really, like
Okay, so I understand the historical parallel you're trying to draw. What I would say to you is that you're watching the gold revaluation happen as we speak. When I watch the gold market on a day-to-day basis, okay, and I've been watching the gold market since on a daily basis, literally for 22 years now. Like I would wake up in the morning, I check the price of gold. I'd watch the way it traded in the overnight market. I do this. I'd watch the whole thing. What I'm going to tell you is this: gold trades differently now than it did between 2002 and 2011 in the last bull market. In the last bull market, if famously Bill Murphy over at GATA did a study after the gold bull market was over, and he said if you started with $10,000 at the beginning of the gold bull market and you bought the New York Open and you sold the New York close at the end of the gold bull market, where the price went from $250 an ounce to $1,900 an ounce, so it went up 700 times. Went up seven. You would have made seven if you had just bought a bunch of gold and done nothing for 9 years. You'd have made 700% on your money. But if you bought the New York Open and sold the New York close every day, you would have lost 70% of your capital. You would have ended the gold bull market, one of the great bull markets in human history, down 70%. You would have started with 10 grand and got 3 grand, as opposed to starting with 10 grand and winding up with 70 grand or 7 grand. Okay, or 70 grand. So that tells you what was happening during that bull market. Today, I see that behavior happening during European trading hours. I don't see it during New York trading hours. During New York trading hours, gold is rising. And when Europe is closed, okay. Now, every once in a while, I see them come in and beat the price down and whatnot on a Friday afternoon or whatever. But I don't really see the Fed and the powers that be in the West fighting the price of gold anymore. They know that gold has to rise as a percentage of the assets on the Fed's balance sheet to be able to restore trust in the monetary system. The Fed still holds the gold on its balance sheet at the price that the Treasury sold it to in 1971 at $42.22 an ounce. When you go look at the Fed's balance sheet statement every Thursday afternoon, you can do this. You can look at the H.4.1 report and you go look at the Fed's balance sheet. And right there, you'll see that the gold reserves, 8,133.5 tons of gold, is valued at $11.04 billion. Now, the market value of that gold, well, multiply all that out and you're going to come up with a number between 600 and 700 billion. So today, with a Fed balance sheet of about $7.5 trillion, gold is about 9% of the Fed's balance sheet. At $1,500 gold and a $9 trillion balance sheet, it was only 5% of the balance sheet. So you can see that the gold reserves are rising. And so what Jerome Powell is doing is he's shrinking the overall size of the balance sheet by getting rid of overpriced treasuries and mortgage-backed securities and pulling them off the balance sheet and staying out of the way of the price of gold. What we're seeing is a very orderly rise in the price of gold. And that's how they're managing it today. $200 up, $100 down, $200 up, $100 down. And the reason why that works so well is because it slowly lets everybody know that the world is changing. Now, on top of that, you have the BRICS, like Russia and China and others, are in the U.S. futures market and other futures markets putting a bid under the price of gold and forcing that price higher. You can see it. Their footprints are all over the market. Famously, Jim Rickards used to talk about this 20 years ago, saying that at one point he expected that like 20% of the volume on the COMEX were Chinese traders, right? But what were they doing then 10, 15 years ago? The Chinese were accumulating. They were buying the gold and they were sticking it on various portions of the Chinese national balance sheet. Maybe not at the PBOC and their official gold reserves, but maybe in the Sovereign Wealth Fund or in this state-owned enterprise over there that's got a whole bunch of gold on its off-balance sheet. The gold is somewhere, and it's somewhere the CCP controls, which is why we say that we think that gold is probably China's gold reserves are probably an order of magnitude higher than what they say they are. By the way, I believe the same thing about the Russian economy as well, the Russian balance sheet as well. Okay, I think Russia states they have what 2,500 tons of gold, something like that. If the Russians have less than 10,000 tons of gold that the government can put its hands on, I would be shocked if the number was less than 10,000 tons. That's my internal operating impression. So now,
so Tom, can I ask you here, what price of gold we're gonna see in our lifetime?
I don't know. What I'll tell you is this, Anya, and this is the point I've been trying to make for a long time now. Take the framework I just laid out. Okay, it's going to be up to us to decide what that number is going to be. We're going to decide on that because we've lost trust in our institutions. We've lost trust in our government, our media, our monetary authorities, and everybody else. This is why Agenda 2030 is ultimately doomed to fail, because nobody wants the world that these people are pushing on us. And they see the level of histrionics and the level of distortion at the political level by buying elections and creating terrible European coalitions and all the rest of it. People are tired of this. They're over it. And I can tell you, as the father of an 18-year-old girl, that generation, starting with her and lower, these kids have zero respect for any of this nonsense. None. They're probably more bitter and conservative than my generation is. Okay? If you want to believe, like, the teenagers in America today are more bitter than I am, that should tell you something, because I'm pretty bitter, right?
But that's kind of sad, I think, if I can just say.
What's that?
That's sad, actually, that they are bitter.
It is sad, but it's also necessary. Because think of it this way. I heard something about Russia.
Not to comply, right? They don't comply.
Yeah. Well, they're going to take, as the British would put it, they're going to take the piss out of everything. And they're going to just say, you know what? No, we're not playing that game. No, you're not going to make me take this terrible McJob that is soul crushing. I'm going to figure something else out to do with my life. Or I'm not going to do anything, and I'm going to wait for the system to collapse, and we're going to move forward. Like, we're not doing it. You can't have the last inch of my soul. And I see it in them. None of them drink. None of them smoke. None of them do drugs. I mean, I can't even get my daughter to have a glass of wine with a Thanksgiving dinner.
You have a good daughter, Tom. Congratulations, because I think there's a lot of teenagers who
I didn't do this. Like, I've been like, no, you can try it. It's fine. You should experience it just so you know. And she's like, no, like, alcohol's bad for you. I'm like, well, you're right. It also tastes good. So, but I say that as a person that doesn't drink very much either, for a variety of reasons. And not the least of which is because, well, I don't like myself when I drink too much. So therefore I don't drink very much. But I do love my whiskey. So I have to balance that. And I love my cigars. I also have to balance that. So, my point being is that, if I remember correctly, and you're probably closer to this than I am, but watching Russia come out of the Soviet Union, and that generation of children that grew up during that time period, it was terrible. It also hardened them, and those people that's the generation now coming into power. Okay. Moreover, I look at we here in the West are like, we're watching our churches get burned down by vandals left and right, and yet Russia's building 1,000 churches a year or some ridiculous number. And we talk about it here in the U.S. saying, in the U.S. the parents still have to drag the kids to church. In Russia, the kids are dragging the parents to church. And if that's true, even if it's not true, even if it's only partially true, it's still indicative of a shift in the zeitgeist and the milieu in which people are living today, and their assumptions about what they expect from their government, what they expect out of their society, and what they expect for themselves. And that's a fundamentally different thing. And so we're going through a similar, I hate to say it, but we're going through a similar period here in the US, and we're going to watch that breakdown. I'm hoping that we avoid the worst of it, but I don't think we will. Okay. And I know that the kids I interact with feel this. And when I sit down and I chat with some of my millennial friends, even in a very liberal town, like I live just north of Gainesville, Florida, which is a classic American college town, like purple hairs everywhere, right? But when I talk to those kids that I hang out with, like, they're not there anymore. They've rejected all that. They've still got they've still got some muddy thinking, but they're not in that same headspace and that they even were 5 years ago. And systems don't change until they're under existential threat, which is part of again, another statement to talk about the BRICS, gold, and everything else. So because the existing hyper financialized system, which was the infrastructure laid to unmoor the world completely from value and make us go to programmable digital currencies with an unapproachable ruling class up top. That's not going to work with these people, with these societal trends happening in major economies around the world. And so their only move here is to start a major war, which is what we're seeing.
And this was my last question for you, because
Sure.
as we know historically, well, as much as I understand, I'm not an expert, that both of the world wars, World War I and World War II, were in fact about the financial reset and the dominance, right, in that matter as well. I mean, there are many aspects of it, but this was one of the main ones.
Yeah, no, I mean,
So,
I'm just saying this. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is this really at this point, because like you say, and I watch this too, that every country that is either already part of BRICS or is trying to become part of BRICS is being attacked this way or the other.
Yes.
Are we? It's a bully's way of trying to dominate, right? It's dominant. So are we at this point? How this reset that they are trying to create, this is not going to work, in my opinion, even though we have this horrendous genocide in Gaza. And they are now doing this with to much smaller, but still to some extent in Lebanon. And I don't know where else they want to go and continue.
No,
but at this point, how they gonna pursue with this project, Tom? Because I don't think they will succeed with this.
I don't either. Okay. But I also know that they're not gonna go gently into that good night either. They're going to kill as many people as possible. Okay, they're going to try and blackmail us with nuclear war and famine and disease and this, and they're going to do everything. They're going to open the seventh seal, and we're going to get. I mean, I'm just waiting for the locusts, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? Like that's where I am in this whole process. Like, what's next? Locusts? That's what I actually, whenever I see something like that, I become, on my Twitter feed, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to be as blunt and as terrible as possible. So what's next? Locusts? Okay, give us locusts. We can handle that too. The point being is, look at BRICS as a price setting cartel. Okay, like OPEC, like a labor union is a way to price, to price set and create a new price regime for labor. OPEC was a cartel designed to try and set the price of oil. Why is OPEC still a thing? Why is it now BROPEC plus? Because we added Brazil and Russia, and to a lesser extent Mexico, right? Why are we adding all these people? But cartels, we know, are only really effective at taking an arbitrage that exists in a system, i.e., we don't pay people enough and we don't treat them well enough, and so the labor is going to get together and demand something better, and eventually the factory owner comes to the table and goes, okay, what do you want? I mean, we want some better wages and Fridays off or Saturdays off, yada yada yada, or at the very least we want credit for this and we can choose when we take our day off, right? And then eventually that negotiation happens, and then the reason and the need for the cartel, for the union, eventually goes away because they got what they wanted. They close the arbitrage between the price and the demand for labor, right? I'm using an example. Well, OPEC's the same way. Why is OPEC still a thing? The OPEC should have blown itself apart ages ago. People should have started cheating in OPEC like heavily ages ago. Why? Because those very same people keep pushing on the oil market to get rid of the oil market. And what happens? When you're under threat as a group, you continue to band together. So OPEC has stayed together, and if not gotten stronger, because of this insane push because of climate change to destroy the oil markets. Why? Because Brussels thought we don't have any oil, we'll destroy the oil markets and we'll try and break OPEC that way. And they didn't break OPEC, they made it stronger. The same way that the neocons tried to destroy Russia multiple times, using the price of oil, I might add, and other things in order to break up Russia. And it failed. Sanctions, this, that, all these things that we've lived with for the last 10 years, they all create external pressure which makes people band together to defend themselves against the external force. It's why you can't really invade another country and subjugate them. If they don't want to be subjugated by you, if they don't want to be governed by you, no matter what you do, eventually, they're gonna rise up against you, and as no matter what, and in effect, no matter how many Gazans Israel kills, doesn't matter. I mean, it does. It's horrible. It's horrific. But in the strategic sense, it's just going to make it worse for Israel in the long run. Now, I have some thoughts about why they're doing this, and I don't want to get into that because it's beyond the scope of this current conversation. But BRICS is just another form of that process that I just described with OPEC. Okay, the international monetary system has turned predatory on the rest of the world. They're trying to destroy everybody else's economy and their ability to price their risk and their assets and everything else and their labor. And guess what? The rest of the world is saying, you know what? Hey, how about we get together and we trade amongst ourselves? You're going to raise the cost of using dollars and think that that's going to destroy my economy? Sorry, no. I'll just trade with my friends in other currencies. I'll just like for example, when Obama took the unprecedented step to kick Iran out of the SWIFT system in late 2011, right? What happened? The Iranian rial collapsed. Turkey, as a response, made gold an asset for the commercial banking system, such that Turkish banks could hold gold on their balance sheets. And guess what they did? They laundered all the Iranian oil trades through their banks because people were buying Iranian oil with gold, and they were laundering. And then the Turkish banks were being the brokers for this. And in order to do that, Turkish banks had to be allowed to hold gold as reserve assets. They're the only country in the world that does that, by the way, or at least did that. I think other countries may do it now, but go look at the World Gold Council data, and you'll always see a little note about Turkey, about the amount of money, amount of gold held by Turkey. It's not just national reserves. It's also the reserves of the commercial banking system in Turkey as well. That was one. What happened also? They bartered with India, Iran's biggest trading partner. India sent them soybeans and washing machines and tractors and industrial goods, and Iran sent them oil.
Now they have Russia. Now they have Russia.
Yeah, and they did the same, and Russia did the same thing. And so Iran set the blueprint for how to beat this system. Then Iran got some support from the Russians and a little bit of tacit support from the Chinese and from this one and from that one, and eventually they muddled through. And they destroyed a generation of Iranian wealth, and it's awful. And by doing so, they also empowered the mullahs to stay in power. Because again, external pressure, no change. Okay, so even if the average Iranian hates their government, they hate the governments that are trying to destroy their government even more. Okay, and my country, right or wrong, is still my society, right or wrong, is still a very powerful thing. So that's why these people always fail. And so when I saw Iran do it in 2011, 2012, when the same playbook was used against Russia in 2014, 2015, when they crashed the price of oil, I said, watch, I literally said this when I was working for Newsmax at the time. I said, Russia's going to survive this. Go long Russia now. You're going to make a scat of money. And I was right, because Putin did exactly what he needed to. He took the punch in the mouth. He took the inflation. He took the recession, and then Russia was, for the most part, free. Renominated all the dollar denominated debt out of dollars. Some of it was in euros, which was also a mistake, but whatever. Putin's made some mistakes in his life, and they almost always center around his relationship with Germany. But that's again different discussion for a different day. Man's not perfect, but he's navigated the waters very, very, very well. Probably better than any world leader in the last 200 years. And now Russia has emerged as a node of stability and against the sea of chaos. And it's very impressive.
That's thank you. But that's exactly how when you describe this with Russia, I agree, because and again, I'm not an expert like you are yourself, but this is from the psychological standpoint. They turned the pain into power and they liberated themselves. So they took advantage of, exactly. This is what you do with the circumstances that don't define you. You redefine the circumstances. So Tom, right? We should all do this in our lives.
No,
but I want to ask you one more thing here.
Sure.
Can I about because we are approaching all of us. Some people care, some people don't. However, it's going to create a number of events. I don't know exactly what events, and that's what I want to ask you. The coming presidential elections in the United States. I was actually in the US in 2020 when they stole the elections. So I saw the shenanigans as much as I could, because of course, nowadays the internet shows you very quickly what's going on, even if you try to hide it. Nevertheless, it is what it is now, okay? And I want to ask you, what are you expecting to see?
That's a loaded question.
What you're expecting to see as far as, because I see this, if I might share here with you, I think they're gonna, if they allow Trump to, because I think this will be a landslide, they will definitely want to steal it again. But let's say he wins and they announce that he wins, so then they will try again many times to remove him
or neutralize
position. And that will maybe before the end of March next year, and then they're gonna do the shenanigans with the financial system. Something's gonna happen there. Second scenario is they will cheat and they will still say that he didn't win, and then we have to drag these results for the longest time ever. So this is my envisioning. What do you think?
Those are two very good suppositions, or very good scenarios. I'll throw a couple more at you. I'm not sure that I agree completely with how you see them playing out. That's fine. We're having a discussion. I'm not trying to. I'm not denigrating what you're saying. I'm just saying, okay, let's think about some other factors. It's very clear that my call that Wall Street had turned sovereigntist, like defend the United States against the globalists, is the correct one. Wall Street is now all in the tank for a Trump win. You can see it everywhere. Hell, they're running that story on Zero Hedge this morning, for Christ's sake. So they understand what Trump represents. That Trump represents at least a return to some semblance of normality. This is not to say that Wall Street are a bunch of good guys. They're not. They're a bunch of amoral sociopaths that like money. But some of them have a sense of country. And they're at the most powerful of the banks. Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, John Solomon over at Goldman Sachs. These are not the same people that created that. They're not the same people they were during Lehman Brothers. Okay. I know I've been watching these people for too long, right? Now, Trump should win pretty quickly. All the swing states are coming out and saying, we're not going to be able to count the election on election night. We're not going to be able to do that. And we all know it's nonsense. We all know that. We all know they're going to try and manufacture votes. We also know that Kamala Harris is the worst candidate since Walter Mondale. So I don't know what to expect. In either of those scenarios, what you should expect is that one side will not accept the results of the election. In this respect, I'm in complete agreement with Martin Armstrong about this. But if the people break as hard as it looks like they're breaking for Trump, and early voting numbers coming out of all the swing states tell us this, she's polling 13, 14 points behind where she should be in all of the battleground states. If the election is beyond the margin of cheating, no matter how much, whatever you think that margin is, they won't be able to stop it. Trump understands what he's up against this time far more than he did in 2016. Very naive when he came to power in 2016. That is not he is not the same guy. Listen to them carefully. They are all telling you what they think is going to happen. Oh my God, if he comes back to power, we're all going to be in jail. Yup. And they frame it in, well, no, he's gonna, they have to keep it like third person. But no. They're going to jail because they're all traitors. And we hang traitors in the United States. And they know it. So,
but Tom, can I ask you here?
So let's just now, if they steal the election, the red states will not accept it. If Trump wins, the blue states will not accept it. And then we're going to have to force them to accept it. They're going to try lawfare. They're going to try bamboozling you with, frankly, bullshit at every turn. They're going to try and mint a whole new generation of brand new electoral politics, constitutional lawyers, like they always do. You can thank the British for this type of media, by the way. They're the ones who created it. But it's not going to work. Trump is going to take power when this is all said and done. Because I have it on enough authority from the people who are, I believe this now, and this is an opinion, but I believe this. When it comes down to it, this is going to come down to the military, and the military is going to side with the Constitution.
So what is this act that he signed in 2017? He signed that act. What was it? 32818. I forgot the numbers. And that was exactly what you're talking about, that the military takes over. So
that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, and executive orders are nice and they're cute, but they don't mean anything. Okay, they're executive orders. If the cabinet secretary does not want to implement an executive order, it doesn't happen. They are directives to the cabinet to do X. They have no basis in the law. Period. Zero. None. You have to have the bureaucracy underneath aligned with you at the executive level to govern by executive order, which is what Barack Obama had. And Trump didn't have that, and he couldn't get anything done. This is important. This is a nuance that even I didn't understand until very recently. And I'm an American, and I'm a political junkie. Okay? So what I'm getting at is, no, what will happen is they will push they're going to push for certain outcomes. Let's call it, Trump is, they staged a false insurrection again, like January 6th and blah, 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 blah. And they try that nonsense again, or whatever they try to do. And someone like Pelosi, or it's going to be a different person this time because she's not speaker, someone like Pelosi is going to demand X, Y, and Z to happen. And the military is going to go, no. In military jargon speak, the 05s and the 06s, which are the lieutenant colonels and the full bird colonels in the American military, and their equivalents in the Navy and the Air Force commanders, and they have a tremendous amount of power. The generals are all politicians. They've been replaced by Obama and they are traitors. but they can direct the O5s and the O6s to do X, Y, and Z, and the O5s and the O6s can go, no, we're not doing that. But I'm your commanding officer. You have to do it. No, we don't have the resources. We don't have the manpower. We don't have this. We don't have that. And we have the ability to say no. And I'm telling you that that's why we haven't started World War III yet. That's why American troops aren't really in Ukraine. Yeah, there are some of them in there, special forces and some other things that are under that leak out. Same thing in Israel. But notice what the United States and the Russians have done in Israel and Iran in the last couple of weeks. They both put their own troops there as tripwires. The Americans put troops on the ground, and the Russians put troops on the ground in Iran. Why? If Israel attacks Iran and kills Russians, Israel has a problem that Israel can't deal with. And if Iran sends missiles over to Israel and kills Americans, Iran has got a real problem. So that's those troops are tripwires to stop the war. And that came from the Pentagon, not the State Department. The State Department thinks it's in charge. Anthony Blinken thinks he's president. Jake Sullivan thinks at the National Security Council thinks he's implementing Blinken's will to start a political World War III. And the military is saying, fuck that, no. And it's right in front of us. And because of that, we may wind up with a different future in the United States than everybody's handicapping right now. And you better hope that I'm right, because what you outlined is absolutely a high probability outcome, either of them. And it's what they're banking on. It's what's drawn up on the, like I like to put it, the Gantt chart at Evil Corp Central over in Brussels. Like, these people have laid all this stuff out and they know what their timeline is. They have their little flow charts and their little schemes and their little plans. And then there's somebody who goes, you know what? No, not happening.
But I have to ask you this. So are you saying that the military will not follow through with those orders? But then again, I want to ask you, isn't it the military complex that has the most corrupted generals there who already sold their souls? So how in this picture, Tom? Because again,
it's about the colonel. It's about the colonel.
Bad blood.
It's about the colonels, not the generals. It's also about the fact that Joe Biden is still commander in chief, and these people threw him under the bus, and they stole $300 million from one of the world's biggest mob bosses. There's something going on here that we need to really be sincere.
So they are throwing themselves under the bus, pretty much. They are.
Biden is this. What I'm saying is that Biden, after they replaced Biden with Harris, stole all of his money, and then basically we're going to throw him to the side and leave his family to the wolves. Joe Biden's like, you know what, Jack, I'm still president. I'm going to put on that MAGA hat. I'm going to throw Kamala under the bus. And when you order me to use the military to do X, Y, Z, I'm going to go, you know what, Jack? No. How about no? Because I made a deal with Trump 3 weeks ago.
Well, then they're going to remove Biden completely.
How?
Like, he's gone.
That maybe.
No, he's already, that's maybe they already did, actually.
Well, no, that's true, but I don't think so. I think that's still Joe Biden. Because you're seeing things happening that don't make any sense. You're seeing systems try to push. Like, the way I like to put it is, these guys are literally saying, "Okay, and I hate to use an American football reference because I don't know how well that'll play in Poland, but it's like these people are acting like it's 4th and 1, but we get to go 12 times until we finally get a first down." No, downs don't matter. We just keep hiking the ball until we win. Or we get to have 12 outs per inning in a game of baseball, and you only get 3. That's the way they act. And they're really good at driving us all crazy into thinking that they're going to do X, Y, and Z, and they're all powerful. And they're very good at making us believe that they're all powerful, but they're not. And so I wouldn't say have faith, but, maybe have a little, maybe at the end of the day, look at the incentives of the people that are adjacent to all this going, we can't allow this to happen.
Yeah, I agree. It depends how the nervous system will react, because if people react to it, it's civil war. If they don't get pulled into it, then they completely lose control over the citizens.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is, and you're close. And I would think that, in living in Eastern Europe, you're closer to this than I am. Being Polish, we haven't dealt with this in our lifetime in the United States. The closest thing we've ever had is what is known as the Civil War, and what I would call the war between the states, or the war to ensure British supremacy into the 20th century, and it failed. Lincoln won. He wasn't supposed to. I'm no fan of Lincoln, but he won, and he wasn't supposed to. The United States was supposed to be broken up into multiple countries by that gambit. That was the first attempted color revolution against the United States. This is the second one. And I don't know that it's going to, and, they think it's going to work, and they may, and it may. And I just hope that here's the thing, as an American and as a human, I understand that the American government is unbelievably evil. Okay. But I feel that way about most governments. So it's like, that's not a stretch for me. I don't want the American government to survive. Ultimately, in my heart of hearts, at a philosophical level, but I don't want it to fail on somebody else's timetable when that group of people is even more evil than the people I'm dealing with, because that leads to an outcome that's even worse for everyone. And the way I view the European Union, the way I view Agenda 2030, the way I view these progeny of the Milner Group and the Club of Rome and all those assholes, like
Knights of Malta.
Yeah, all of that. So I'm at the point now where I'm like, all that needs to end. And the people who can make that end, there are only a couple of groups on the planet that are strong enough to achieve that end. One of which is the Federal Reserve and the commercial banks in New York, because they control the price of money. The other is the BRICS, specifically Russia, China, and Iran. To a lesser extent, India. India could be a player at this table if the Indians' political structure could stop being schizophrenic, i.e., stop being so damn British. So that's why there isn't a lot of influence in Iran. There isn't a lot of influence in Russia. There isn't a lot of influence in China. Not with Putin, Khamenei, and Xi at the helm. You get rid of any of those three men, you replace them with somebody else a little bit more squishy, and that ends. And that's, again, why they're so desperate to try and remove any one of those three people. But Xi's made it abundantly clear there will be no Western oligarch control of Chinese financial markets. Putin went through the entirety of the last 10, 12, 20 years fighting that, after Russia was literally taken over by Western financial assets. And Iran staged a revolution in 1979, in effect, for the same reasons. Okay. So history's messy. Nobody's a white hat. Nobody's going to make a perfect moves. And at times we want to structure these narratives in these stories in such a way that they have one outcome, like they're a movie with an inevitable outcome. They don't work. History doesn't work that way. History is like, and to quote Borges, is a garden of forking paths, right? And the intersection of all of these different things and the people and all of it is going to be messy. And let's just hope that certain things occur in a certain order that lead us out of this period of history into the next one, which is better than than this. We're coming to the end, in my mind. This is my view. We're coming to the end of a big 300 plus era of history, starting with the formation of the Bank of England in 1694 and running up until today. This is my personal theory. Okay. Salt at the taste, folks. I don't care. It's the era of using central banks to perform currency arbitrage to affect political change. Okay, this is the defining idea of the era. That's coming to an end. What's it going to be replaced with? More of the same? A leveling up of that same system into the next thing? Or has it become so energetically untenable to continue that system that, as we physicists like to say, it's like pushing a dead whale up a beach? And they started with like a couple of grains of sand and it was easy, or like a conch shell. Well, that's easy. But now they're trying to push a dead whale up the beach. And the whale keeps getting bigger and heavier and more. And so just keep dragging on them, keep pulling back on the rope while they try and tell you to push forward. And eventually it'll all collapse under the weight of its own insanity and ineptitude. And that's exactly the way we have to look at it. And that's why when I look at the way Putin is operating the special military operation in Ukraine, or the war in Ukraine, I see him playing a game of attrition and time. He's not trying to win by taking territory and forcing a solution. He's trying to make us expend as much capital as possible and make Ukraine not worth taking, defending. And then eventually Ukraine collapses. The whole thing collapses. It causes multiple governments to fall. It causes the potential. It causes all of these countries that have been pushing out to start having to think about turning inward to fix their own problems, because they're all going to get hung. Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Ursula von der Leyen. Okay, that eventually that just stops. Bibi Netanyahu, that just stops. And then Russia wins, and then and then the Ukraine will sue for whatever peace they need to, and it will be at a point where NATO is not strong enough to ever threaten Russia again through the Ukrainian corridor. And whatever is left of Ukraine will be what's left of Ukraine. But don't for a minute think that Putin is going to leave the job undone. And what the British are fighting for now is Odessa. They're not fighting for Crimea. They're not fighting for Kharkov. They're fighting for Odessa. Because if they lose Odessa, they lose they'll lose the Romanian ports. They'll lose the rest of the Eastern European ports as well that are part of it, because the European Union will collapse. And then the Black Sea will become a British lake or a Russian lake, and that's it. It's over. It's done. And Russia's future for the next 200 years is secured. That's what Putin is playing for.
And that's actually, Tom, this is so good. When you say this, it's like literally, I look at this from the psychological standpoint. This is when one is having a transformation. You don't want to rush this transformation. You want to go through different stages. You are going into the unknown, so you might be still fearful. However, you have to keep on going, because if you rush it and you are faced with the same lesson, opponent, you might not be ready to sustain yourself and you fall into the same trap. This is psychological. This is really psychological game.
Anya, last point, and I'm going to have to run, is the following. Think about, and no, it's just that I love to talk about this stuff. I'm just telling you, I have to put a time limit on myself because I have other work I need to get done today.
Thank you. Yes.
I would love to sit and chat with you for 3 hours if I had a full open day. I would have no problem doing so. So think about Brexit. It was Agenda 2030. All of a sudden, it became Agenda 2020. It was originally Agenda 2050. Then they moved it up to 2030. Now it's then they popped COVID in 2020. They weren't going to pop COVID on us for another 10 years. They had to prep the ground first. But Brexit and Trump upped their timetable. When you look at the changes that I've talked about within the American financial system that was accelerating the timetable, they lost monetary control with SOFR and LIBOR. Once you understand that, like, oh, they had to as my good friend and partner Dexter White likes to put it, they went for the boob too early on prom night. And and we were not ready for it. And everybody went, no, we're not doing this. What are you kidding me? Wait, you were going to go for it? And they put the whole like big marketing push for global communism on the table, and everybody was like, yeah, no. And then after that, it's just like watching a series of rearguard actions. I'd be honest with you, and they're very good at fronting like they're all powerful. The latest
Like
one was that
they are doing, right? Yeah.
yeah, and the latest iteration of this is that they can control hurricanes. And I just like all right. I mean, I'm seriously, and I'm like, the
But I
same
feel
people. Okay, the same
but
reasons that the same reason you don't believe in global warming or climate change is the same reason that they can't control hurricanes, folks. It's the same problem. It's an order of it's a mathematical problem. It's dumb. It's silly. They don't have that
you
power.
gotta
I wish they did. It would be easier because then I know how to fight them.
but I know you have to go, and I took longer than I asked you for the time. So I really appreciate. Sorry because I get really excited when when my guests come. I really have a different perception, and I like to be mentally stimulated to the visions, and then I just like to respond to it. But thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, absolutely.
Be strong there in the country of what's coming.
We'll see what happens, and we'll do this again in a couple of months, and we'll see where we are. I mean, it's only going to get like I'll be honest with you, Anya. Last point on the way out the door. Like Trump or hate Trump, at least he's entertaining. And the one thing I can't
especially that dinner, the dinner in New York, right? The last one, yeah.
Oh yeah, the Al Smith dinner, like him going to McDonald's, Trump is hilarious, right? And he's at the point now where he knows he's a one-term president. He knows this is his last kick at the can, and now he's free. He's just going to say whatever the hell he wants. And could you imagine another 4 years of pathetic virtue signaling of the weakest kind, like we have coming out of Kamala Harris? Could you imagine? Like, if that's not going to destroy the country, I don't know what would, because like no one wants to live with that, and the ridiculously smarmy crap that we see out of Hollywood and it's just awful. Like, and no one wants to live in that world. Like, no one wants to live in that world. Not even in their heart of hearts. Not even the people who are going to vote for her want to live in that world, and they know it, but they can't admit it to themselves. So we'll deal with their psychology later, and we'll get them all therapy after Trump wins. That's my goal. My goal is to have the Defense Department's budget and subsidize national therapy for the mental breakdown that's coming for a whole lot of people in the United States. It would be the world would be a better place. But
So thank you, Tom. Tomorrow BRICS meeting. We're gonna watch what's gonna happen the next 3 days. It will be interesting. And
it will be.
Thank you so much again, everyone, for watching. Until next time. Bye, guys.